UFC just recently announced that Ben Askren will be taking on the ruthless Robbie Lawler, the ruthless Robbie Lawler, in Ben Askren's UFC debut. Long time coming. Couldn't have picked a better matchup to start off the saga that is known as the Funky Era. Ben Funky Askren. This guy's been around for quite a while. He's 18-0, Division I, one of the greatest collegiate wrestlers in recent memory. A guy that I really had real doubt as to whether or not we'd ever see him in the UFC. As a hardcore combat sports fan, whether it's, MMA, boxing, amateur wrestling, the amateur wrestling scene knows Ben Askren very well. Straight out of Missouri, I believe, one of the best wrestlers I've seen in college wrestling. And I know that scene fairly well, follow it fairly well, just as much as I'd follow MMA. Really enjoy that because I wrestled in high school for a limited time, and I really grew to appreciate the sport for what it is. And seeing a guy like Ben Askren, who has the opportunity to make so much money in the UFC, is really great. I feel like that's the best part of mixed martial arts, is that it's actually given wrestlers an extension on their career, rather than just being the end goal being the Olympics. The end goal is, the Olympics, but also maybe along the way you could win a MMA title or two and get some good paydays. If you're that great, which Askren is one of the better MMA wrestlers in recent memory. I'd put him on the level of Habib. I'd put him on the level of GSP. His wrestling is very good. So big ups for him to make it this far and pursue his dream of fighting in the UFC. And, it was a rocky road for a little while, but Askren was able to really stay on the road and make it happen. So all that being said, a real welcome to the UFC matchup for Askren, as he's slated to take on ruthless Robbie Lawler, a guy that I believe is the toughest fighter in the UFC. I really believe that. The most durable, most nasty, just an all-out animal that is Robbie Lawler. And he always has been. He always will be. To say that Ben Askren has to start his UFC career with a Robbie Lawler fight, that is a real tough fight for anyone. And granted, Lawler is coming off of an ACL injury, which was very serious, which was one that kept him out of action for quite a while. He split his last two fights, a victory over Donald Cerrone and a loss to Rafael dos Anjos, where it was one of the worst losses of his career. Rafael dos Anjos virtually ran right through him, really dominated him, outstruck him, where Robbie Lawler, it was clear that knee injury early on in the fight really plagued him. So it'll be very interesting to see which Robbie Lawler we get, but I think if you underestimate Robbie Lawler, if you look past Robbie Lawler, if you think that it's just going to be an easy fight, Ben Askren will find himself in serious trouble. The last guy that I'd scoff at, the last guy that I'd say, well, maybe he's not what he once was, is Robbie Lawler. This guy, to say he bites down on his mouthpiece when he fights is, there's been fights that have happened in Lawler's career that make you wonder how he could come back from more. He's the quintessential Rocky-esque fighter, really. The fact that he's able to absorb the punishment that he has, the fact that he's able to dish it out the way he does, it's truly amazing. And he's a part of two really great fights, two really great title fights, one versus Rory McDonald and the other versus Carlos Condit. And he fought really, really hard fights with Johnny Hendricks in their fights together. So Lawler's really put himself through quite an ordeal physically, and Ben Askren could take him down and could keep him down. But if Askren himself is going to assume that Robbie Lawler is just some guy, this is a former champion, former multiple-time champion, defended the belt multiple times, and really showed that he's one of the toughest sons of bitches that's ever fought in MMA, not just in the UFC. And really, you have to wonder if this is Dana White's way of saying, you want it in? Well, you got in. You want it in? You want it in the UFC? Well, we made that happen for you, and take it or leave it. I really think that this fight will be a great battle. Great battle. I wish it wasn't put on a pay-per-view. I am a little bit upset about that, because I would like to have seen this fight on TV. I feel like the more eyes on Ben Askren, the better. The more eyes on Robbie Lawler, the better in terms of ratings for TV. I feel like this fight would have really been able to main event an FS1 card or an ESPN card, being that it's happening in January. But, that's not the route that they went. They wanted to put it on a pay-per-view, and it's rumored that fight will be the co-main, and then the main will be TJ Dillashaw versus Henry Cejudo for the UFC Bantamweight title, where TJ will be defending that belt, attempting to defend it against Henry Cejudo. So that's a huge fight, and that's a fight that needs to happen in the main event, rightfully so. It's a champion versus champion fight, but I feel like Askren and Lawler could really do well on its own on TV, and you'd have an ability to really promote Ben Askren more throughout a TV card than you would throughout a pay-per-view. But that's just my 2 cents in the business of it. Robbie Lawler, you can show all the clips of him fighting just this pure dog-eat-dog mentality, and fans will gravitate to those clips. So this is just going to be such a great fight. I would pencil this in as an early candidate for fight of the year, just based on the abilities that these two fighters have. Askren, the wrestler, Lawler, the striker, the classic matchup that has had such a prevalent plot line in the 2018 MMA year. Well, now it's moving over to 2019. So I just can't wait for this fight. Ben Askren versus Robbie Lawler. Welcome to the UFC for Ben Askren. This is a tough UFC debut. It can't get much tougher than that. Take care, everybody.